Welcome back to Hugging the Cactus, a Mel Gibson podcast. And as you can see, yes, you can see, we are no longer a podcast. We are now also visual. You've gone from radio to television. Welcome back. It's been a long time for me. Wow, it really has been a long time. So what have I been up to? I'll just sum it up really quick. I'm no longer self-employed. I had to join the ranks of people who work in corporations. Yes, that's right. I am a corporate drone now. So that tends to take up a lot of my time. I have job certifications that require a lot of self-study outside of job hours. It's a pain in the ass. It's hugging a cactus, that's for sure. Aside from that, of course, I'm a writer and I needed to finish several projects, so I did. I finished my novel. It still has to be rewritten 4 times, according to my agent. I also finished a collection of short stories. 9 of those are sold and will be published, probably in Sweden, Germany, and a couple of other countries, so that'll be fun. What else? Well, a ton of stuff, but none of it podcasting. And I do freely admit I have missed it, and I have missed you guys. What I have not missed, I must freely admit, is the tremendous problem of working with colleagues in different time zones. I love working with everyone. That's not the issue. The main issue is it just becomes a scheduling nightmare. As you know, there was once a great podcast called Slycast. Slycast ended pretty much when the engine of that podcast, which is Craig Cohen, of course, who we all know, moved out west and got into different time zones. Well, I've fallen victim and fallen prey to the same problem. So I know exactly what plagues our friend Craig. Anyway, I still hope to continue with Doug, however, for the Arnold podcast. But, you know, he had another kid and he's a busy guy. So we hope to have some recordings soon. We already recorded 2 for the next season. Those are in the can, but we need to record the other 2 that are planned and then get on with it. As I am getting on with this season. And this I will be doing solo, mostly because I've added a visual element. I really want it to be visual. I've always wanted that. I just didn't have the know-how. So that's another thing I've been working on in my absence, in my time away from podcasting. I've been working on green screening a lot, and as you can see, these are the first results of that. So I hope you will enjoy this format more. I suspect I will as well. It does require me to fill the hour as a solo host, which is a little lonely. I must admit I do miss the other guys, but hopefully the added challenge of actual visual representation of what we are talking about will make the episodes exciting nonetheless. So what are we talking about today? Well, today and this season, really, we are talking about Mel and what I'd like to refer to him as Mel in his bad guy phase. Most of those bad guy roles are recent. Most of those bad guy roles are cameos to a significant extent. And that's one of the cameos we will be covering today, Dangerous. Yes, the movie Dangerous from 2021. That poor movie that fell victim to the pandemic, because it was released in theaters, but of course, well, we all know what 2021 was like. So an $8 million movie only brought in about $164,000, and that's about it, which is sad, because it's actually good. I think if it would have been released in normal circumstances prior to 2021, it would have done fine. But alas, I've looked over the people who worked on it. Their careers took a serious hit. Not sure if that was because of the lack of success of this movie. Could be. It could also be the fact that most movies no longer get any funding anymore. Most projects simply won't be greenlit. Now, this was a Lionsgate production. As we all know, Lionsgate isn't around anymore, as are most TV studios, movie studios, what have you. It's only the big 2 now. It's Disney and it's Warner Brothers. Well, if you count Netflix with its streaming content, I guess there's 3. But really, it's only 2 in the traditional sense. That really has harmed the commercial art we all know and love as movie making. It has turned it into a nightmare. Let's face facts. And everyone is suffering. So if you look at, for example, the writer, who is Chris Borelli. Now, our friend Chris Borelli did some pretty significant things. He wrote Armageddon. He also wrote Con Air. After Dangerous, he really didn't do anything anymore. Except one movie in 2022, which was an indie movie, and it was called Run and Gun. Same with Kevin DeWalt, the producer, Canadian-based producer. He did about 60 movies prior to 2021, and nothing since. The most memorable one for me was Dolan's Cadillac. It's a movie based on a short story by Stephen King, starring Christian Slater. Then there's David Hackle. David Hackle is the director who was intimately involved with the Saw franchise. He did everything from production design to ultimately finally directing, and he hasn't directed anything since 2021. Then there's Mark Dobrescu, the cinematographer. He has made no movies since 2021. He does have a gig now in Bollywood, making a TV show. And then there is the guy who did the soundtrack, Todd Bryanton. He has done nothing since 2021 until this year, when he finally got a zombie movie called Die Alone with Frank Grillo. Now then there's Scott Eastwood, who we all know and love, the son of Clint Eastwood. My favorite movie by Scott is by far The Outpost. I love him in that. Scott is criminally underutilized, but that is typical for this time. Starring role is filled by, and that's almost a cameo, is filled by Tyrese Gibson, who we know from the Fast and Furious franchise. He's also a rapper. He's one of those guys who was filthy rich before he became an actor. He kind of did an Arnold there. There's this strange story when you look up this movie where apparently he gave his hotel room to a vagrant during shooting. Well, if you're rich, I guess you're a little eccentric. Anyway, then there's Femke Janssen, Bond girl from GoldenEye. I doubt she could be cast today because she's disfigured by Botox. However, she's still a decent actress and she does a decent job in this movie, even though you don't see much of it. This is a typical product of 2021, meaning there are not a lot of scenes where actors actually interact, and especially the stars of the movie, quote unquote, they all have pretty much solo scenes, and that is, I guess, typical. Dangerous. What kind of movie is this, and what is Mel doing in it? Well, Dangerous is a vehicle for Scott Eastwood. Scott Eastwood plays a psychotic killer, or a former Navy SEAL, or a former mercenary. It's not really well explained. However, we come to know D, as he's called in the movie, or Dylan Forrester, as a ex-convict who is on parole. He's introduced reading his brother's cards. He apparently has a brother who's still in contact with him. His brother is a college professor and he's researching all kinds of stuff and he's excited about it. The final card that D gets is unfortunately the card where he is informed that his brother has met his demise, that his brother is dead, and he's invited to the wake, or at least the burial. It's not really sure. Now, his brother lives on an island, a remote island in Washington, on the coast of Washington State. It has a lighthouse. It's a former Navy base, apparently, a kind of a mysterious island. The story is a mystery in itself. You only slowly are introduced to facts that kind of give you some clue as to why all those people are there. Because, of course, mercenaries show up. Basically, D's former boss. Now, exactly how this contrivance, this coincidence takes place is revealed later on in the movie. Part of the storytelling is through phone calls D makes to his shrink. His shrink is played by Mel Gibson. And that's the main reason why we are talking about this right here. Now, in the first scene that Mel is introduced, there are about 5 scenes Mel is actually in. So he had a pretty easy job. Again, much like Femke Janssen, his scenes are mostly solo, which is typical for 2021 when there was a pandemic and you weren't allowed to film with multiple people unless it met certain conditions. Now, Femke Janssen plays an FBI special agent who visits Mel Gibson's character, who is a shrink, who is actually Dylan Forrester's shrink. She explains that he's on the rampage and that he just tortured and killed someone in the room he was staying in. That's kind of a peculiar thing because, as Femke will later explain to a colleague, that's not his MO. They never found any of the other bodies, which makes me think, okay, so perhaps that's why D is not incarcerated anymore, because they really couldn't prove anything and couldn't link him to anything. So they must have just gotten him on something inane and he's out now. But they know who he is and he's being watched. So when he breaks parole, they of course chase him, and that's what's happening now. So of course the typical scene where the FBI agent tries to press the shrink for information, but the shrink has to keep all the information on his patient confidential, blah blah blah, typical, predictable. Anyway, it's fun anyway because Mel Gibson plays a funny shrink. He's a character. That's one of the things I like about this movie. We get to see Mel Gibson, show his character acting style, because this is a complete kind of left turn from anything else he's done before. We see Mel as we know him now, gray-haired, gray-beard, but the professor has the behavior of what is typical for people in his profession. He's a little quirky, fidgety, he's a character. Anyway, the shrink explains to the FBI agent that, he's very proud of D, and he's done a lot of work with him, and it's all very promising. And obviously his career is on the line a little bit. He has a lot of stake in this. And so the FBI agent leaves, and he immediately downs a pill against stress. Then there's the second scene. Mel Gibson's in. Because D, who's in the meantime met his family again, calls a shrink, talks about his confrontation he's had with his mother, because obviously his mother blames him for a lot of stuff, and he's a psychopath who has no sympathetic feelings towards anything. He's awkward. He doesn't really understand human interaction much. I mean, he has to read comforting messages off a card so he can be a part of the wake. He practices it in the mirror. It's a funny scene. Mel Gibson asks Scott Eastwood, well, do you have anything to tell me? If there's anything, please tell me. While he's looking at the FBI card the special agent left him, because he knows that he tortured and murdered someone in his room. He says, no, not really. And that's the end of that scene. So we kind of get a glimpse into what kind of relationship they have. The shrink tries to help, knows more than he's letting on. D doesn't think mentioning he tortured and murdered someone is pertinent at that point, so he doesn't say anything. Anyway, quickly come to the end of Tyrese Gibson's involvement as the sheriff that he plays. Obviously, this sheriff finds out that Dylan Forrester is wanted, so the sheriff takes him down to the holding cell in the bunker. That's part of the naval base. They have an awkward conversation because D needs his chill pill. So this sheriff goes back to his boat, because obviously they're still on the island, and a bunch of mercenaries show up. And so this sheriff mistrusts the situation, tries to arrest them. But these men are all heavily armed. So, he's a little bit outgunned. So it ends in he's being riddled by bullets, and finally the head bad guy shoots him. Tyrese Gibson falls back into the water, and that's the last we see of him. Exit stage left. Then there's the third scene with Mel Gibson, because D calls his shrink again. The psychiatrist is making dinner, and he's cutting vegetables, and basically the scene establishes that the shrink is completely out of the loop on the situation, because D is calling him to get advice. He's in a life-threatening situation. He's a psychotic killer, and he's basically asking, what should I do here? Because my first instinct is to just murder everybody. The psychiatrist actually gives him, for the situation at least, counterproductive advice. He's basically saying, whatever you plan on doing, just think of, don't do anything that you won't be proud of later. This is happening while D is holding a knife to his hostage, who he's interrogating. So that's interesting. The fun part is, D had threatened to cut his eyes out. Apparently, his hostage, one of the mercenaries, gave up the information he wanted, which he said was disappointing, to give you an idea what kind of psychotic killer this is. Anyway, the interactions with all the relatives are really funny. It's one of the things that really works about this movie. It's well written. You can tell that the cast is committed, and they really want to work. As a result, even though the whole story is a little contrived and it's a little silly, they really lean into it and it's fun. So this is a terrible movie to watch at all. Now, it is revealed in an exposition dump that the dead brother Sean was a history professor and who had bought the island through some benefactor, a mysterious benefactor who we will get to know later. Dee starts asking questions about this. Then we get to scene number 4 with Mel, because his family wants him to leave. They're saying, these mercenaries are here because of you, so if you leave, they will leave. We just want to be left alone. We want to get on with our lives. It's been bad enough. Well, okay, so ultimately he leaves, escaping with a boat under fire, but he returns through a different cove. He calls his shrink again. So here comes the next scene, scene number 4. They have a heart-to-heart. Mel Gibson tells him, well, it sounds like you're really overwhelmed. Too bad things went awry with your family, but, it's good that you came back and that you're willing to attempt it again. And so he says, well, just deal with every problem one at a time. And he asks him, do you understand? And he says, looking at the sniper nest at the top of the lighthouse, yeah, that's actually a very good idea. So they hang up and you see Mel Gibson's character downing a drink, which I thought was, well, interesting. He says to himself, for God's sake, don't kill anyone. A funny scene for many reasons, considering Mel Gibson's brush with alcoholism. Anyway, Dee gets back into the naval base where his family is. He gets into a very close combat knife fight, slashes the femur artery of one of the mercenaries, and sort of just wryly comments, you might want to put some pressure on that. The relationship with the head of the mercenaries called Cole plays out. Cole is as insane as Dee is, and apparently they had a grand old time when they were in the SEALs and when they were mercenaries together. You can tell that Cole had a great amount of admiration for him, but now that he's seeing a shrink and trying to better his life, this Cole doesn't really like him anymore, doesn't respect him much. Typical. A lot of projection there. Things escalate from there. They find the reason why Sean bought the island, which is a cave that you can access through the wine cellar. In that cave there is a Japanese submarine. And this Japanese submarine is filled with gold. Gold bars, in fact. The Yamashita gold, which is a legendary run. The Japanese used a lot of submarines to ferry valuables, even a jet fighter at some point. Nazi Germany, I should say, had given the Japanese a jet fighter to fight the bombers that were hitting Japan. Ultimately, they never manufactured it, but it apparently did see action. But they used those submarines for that, as well as ferrying gold and all kinds of other stuff. So this is actually historical. Of course, the leader of the mercenaries, Cole, takes his mother, Dee's mother, hostage and makes him carry bars of gold up top. Those are really heavy, apparently. There's a scene with a big shootout where some of the mercenaries are shot by Dee, who is gleefully peppering them with the deck gun, which is this huge 50 caliber anti-aircraft gun on the top of the submarine. Probably the highlight of the movie. Now, of course, he gets into a fight with Cole, which is the level boss, or the game boss, I should say. He wins, he leaves. And then you have, actually during the firefight, you have one scene where Dee calls his psychiatrist again, asks him, okay, so what do I have to do in a situation where I have to do something to save myself? And the shrink, finally getting around to the reality of the situation, what, are you being shot at? He tells him, look, just do whatever it takes to save your ass. And he asks, whatever? Yes, whatever it takes. So that's when the deck gun scene happens. And the final scene is actually a voiceover, so I call it 5.5 scenes, not 6. It's a voiceover only because Dee calls his shrink for the last time, and they discuss the motivation for his brother looking for the gold. It's kind of an exposition dump. Dee says goodbye and tell him he's going to try to be himself for a while, and he dumps his lithium into the ocean, and he sails away from the island, and that's the end of the movie. So all in all, enjoyable film to watch. I think Mel really contributed to this, really elevated the material in a lot of ways, because the communication with the psychiatrist really highlights the insanity of Scott Eastwood's character, and also why it's enjoyable in that way. He kind of comes off as a kind of Dexter in this way. And Dexter, of course, had an inner monologue with his adoptive father in his head. Scott has his relationship with a psychiatrist. It's very similar. So I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed Mel in it. We don't get to see much of him anymore these days. He really doesn't have to act, and he doesn't get many parts regardless. He also doesn't get to produce much, and he doesn't get to direct much because, well, we all know the state of Hollywood, and we all know he's blacklisted. Well, there have been a lot of rumors over this past year that Lethal Weapon 5 is going to happen. I think it's pretty obvious that it won't, but you still see the occasional blurb about it. And there does seem to be some interest, but I doubt it will get any funding because what kind of DEI boxes are you going to check with a Lethal Weapon movie? They were already way ahead of their time when they were making them originally back in the 80s and 90s. Nobody will ever give Mel Gibson money for this, ever. I doubt it. So that's the wrap for this one. The entire season will be more of the same, to be honest. I've got some good stuff planned, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.